Welcome to the Azure podcast, being recorded on August the 9th, 2023. I'm Russell Young, and I'm joined by Sujit, and our guest speaker today, a fellow Brit who works here at Microsoft's UK subsidiary as well, Ian Pike. Ian's a data and analytics cloud solution architect. He's been doing a lot of work and enablement around Fabric recently, so I'm really looking forward to that conversation and finding out a lot more about that. It's one of the areas I don't know much about, but I know there's a lot of excitement in the industry generally around that. So start with a few announcements. I see, Sujit, you've got a couple in there. Do you want to kick off?
Yeah, sure. So there's various announcements with two specific services, our Azure Chaos Studio and Azure Load Testing. So in Chaos Studio, one of the new preview features is you could use a user-assigned managed entity or a custom role assignment, which you can assign to Azure Chaos Studio so that they can inject the correct faults into your system. They have to give them certain permissions so that they can actually get into your resources and make changes. And so you can now kind of tailor that very nicely. So that's one update that's been announced. Another one is they're expanding the regions where Azure Chaos Studio is available, and it is now also available in the Southeast Asia region. And finally, probably the biggest update in that service is there's a couple of interesting new faults which are being added to the app service and virtual machines. Those are the two services I guess that are the most popular ones, and they've added a fault where you can just kind of randomly stop the app service, to kind of simulate what happens in a real world scenario. How does your overall application react when something like that happens? And another one is which I find very interesting, is it can inject a network packet loss. So, maybe there's, dropping a few packets here and there, and what happens, what happens to your application, to the libraries that you're using and things like that. So I think those are nice updates for Azure Chaos Studio. Then for load testing, we've got another set of updates. One is you can now run load tests for up to 24 hours. I think it used to be 3 hours is the default. So if you want to do beyond 3 hours, you still have to submit a support ticket, but they'll allow you to run it for up to 24 hours. So if you do have those long tests that you need to run, maybe there's a whole variety of faults that you're testing, you could kind of put that in there. Then also with load testing is you can now use the Azure CLI, AZ-CLI, to do a number of load testing commands. So if you're kind of doing this in an automated way, you could maybe just create a load test, run some tests, get some metrics, all from within automation, just using the AZ-CLI. So that will really come in handy. And then finally, the biggest update, I think, is that you can now run tests with up to 100,000 virtual users. So really, you're talking of using 400 engine instances of Azure Load Test to give you a total of 100,000 virtual users, which is a lot of users, I think. But yeah, you still have to submit a support ticket for that. Again, it's not like automatic, but they will give you that bump if you ask for it. So those are my updates, Russell.
Thank you. Yeah, that Chaos Studio one, that's an interesting one. So testing mobile apps and things, getting network packet loss, that would be a good use case Indeed. For that. Wish I found that a long time ago. So the only one for me is, well, we haven't mentioned AI in a while now, at least 5 minutes or so. So yeah, it's about scaling and the push of OpenAI and Azure AI infrastructure generally. So we've got some new SKUs. So there's an ND H100 V5 VM SKU, which has got the NVIDIA H100 Tensor Core GPUs in it. So this comes with low latency networking and other features that are really beneficial for AI scenarios. Those are now available in Eastern US and Southern Central US. You've still got to register to get access to them, but they're there and available now. But probably the biggest announcement around this area is Azure OpenAI service has lots of different models in it, and those models are available in certain regions. And one of the most in-demand model at the moment is GPT-4 and GPT-3.5 Turbo. They're now available in Australia East, Canada East, US2, Japan East, and UK South. And it's already available in a few places like East US, France Central, Southern Central US, and West Europe. So that's spreading and growing out. Yeah, really good news for the UK as well to see us finally in the list there. I know a lot of people and customers that we've got have been waiting for GPT-4. The article also talks about the growth in OpenAI customers and how popular the service is. We've onboarded something like 11,000 customers already, and there's an average of 100 new customers per day in the last quarter onboarding into it. So a lot of good growth there, a lot of interesting use cases, and there's a website I'll stick in the show notes which has got some really good use cases around Azure AI, ML, and some customer stories on there that are really interesting to read, because quite often when you think about OpenAI, we're used to the chat interface, we're used to some machine learning models for recommendation engines and things like that, but there's so many different ways in which you can use it with these new generative AI models. There's a lot of interesting stories in there. So, Ian, over to you. I'd love it if you could just give us a quick intro to yourself and your role, and why have you been playing with Fabric so recently as well?
So Ian Pike. I've just transitioned from a cloud solution architect in our data and AI area, or CSU, customer success unit, over to what we call is an Azure technical specialist. So it seems like a role that I did almost 6 years ago when I joined Microsoft, but they've slightly renamed it for us again. But yeah, working closely with customers to sort of unblock problems they're having, early on when they're sort of looking at our sort of solutions. I come from a Power BI background, so Fabric is sort of being built on top of the Power BI world. So I was lucky to get involved in what are Fabric Insiders, and getting an early sort of look at that. So I've been able to help in the UK sort of skill up and help some of our other CSAs and our technical specialists get early sight of that, and then helping now customers sort of understand how they could go and use Fabric.
Cool, thank you. And what is Fabric? I mean, I've heard lots of announcements around it. I understand it's some kind of software as a service that's related to databases. What's the overview and the use case?
Yeah, so we announced from Microsoft Build Fabric, which is obviously this brand new SaaS, and it's a SaaSification of a lot of existing services. So Power BI is what it's been built on top of. So if people are aware of Power BI, it'll be an easier transition. But a lot of our existing PaaS services, for example, Synapse, Data Factory, and some of our other ones, and some brand new services have been built in. So it's very much bringing everything into one interface. So previously, what would happen is that you would go up and spin up each of these separate services as PaaS platform, and then have to manage them in different UIs, and then have to work out your networking, your private endpoints and things like that, how you would link them together. And then now with Fabric, you've almost brought that into one UI, so everything's in there, and it's almost in capacities. So we sort of separated the compute and the storage. So you go and buy a capacity which has got sort of a lot of compute attached to that, and you can go and do that, and then the storage is very separate. So it is, very much taking existing Synapse, and then also sort of bringing that into a SaaS world.
Yeah, so from someone who, coming from someone like me who maybe doesn't understand a lot about data in Azure, right? And I'm more of a software engineer. The data side has still been a little bit of a black box to me. But I want to understand, like, what are some of the typical use cases that someone would say, oh, we need to, this is our flow or our data flow or whatever is something that it makes sense to use Fabric, right? Give us an example so that we understand, what is the reason for someone to even look at Azure Fabric?
Yeah, and I think a lot of the use cases that we had previously with Synapse or Data Factory, so Data Factories were our orchestration tools, so for bringing data into either a SQL server or a data warehouse or onto a data lake. Those have always been there. So the scenarios that were always there before are still the same. So your ETL or ELT jobs, or going building a data lake, and then going in and spinning up something so Power BI can go and connect and bring that data to life for your business users, is exactly the same. So, but apart from, we're now bringing this into a SaaS world where you don't have to go and pre-provision all of those services. So previously you would have to spin up a cluster, for example, a Spark cluster, and then work out how long that was running, maybe shut it down, how that would connect, and the permissions. Whereas with Fabric, it's very much, you'll hear there's two big things. There's the OneLake, which underpins everything, so all your data is in one place. But also there's this one security, which is a feature that's coming. It isn't quite there at the moment, so you have to go into each of the areas and sort of pre-provision that security. But previously, with the past services, you would have had to go into a different UI, spin that up, and it may have been a different engineering team that would look after that. And then there would be all the blockers of getting that approved, and then the costings for all of that, and managing all of that. Whereas, one of the key phrases that came out, that Satya and Arun, who sort of owns this platform, sort of talks, the chief, data officers don't want to be the chief integration officer, or the CIO doesn't want to be an integration, having to have that bottleneck of doing it. So, doing it in Fabric is really simplifying that process. It's not going to take away any of those existing past services, so they're not being sunsetted. This isn't the end of the world if customers have got those already. So, there's no, panic to go and sort of say we need to jump because Microsoft's getting rid of them. It is more about a vision, because it's in preview at the moment, that in the next 6 months, we're going to, sort of do that. And being a little bit careful about where I say the GA is at the moment, because it isn't available to say. So yeah, it's sort of trying to bring all those services in that, and sort of, so there's no real difference. It's more about bringing collaboration to make that easier for other teams.
Thank you. So there's a couple of questions come out of that. One is around the preview program. Is that something you can get onto? Do you need to apply for it? How do you go about playing with it?
Yeah, so it was obviously announced out of build in May, and it's a free trial. So Microsoft is giving you access to this. So if you've got Power BI already, it's quite easy. You can go in and within your tenant, if you're a Power BI administrator, you can go and enable it. There are some sort of certain dates, and those have slightly passed. So some customers may have already seen it enable in their tenants already, which might be interesting for some of them. And I can supply you with a link which talks a little bit about this, what you can and can't do. But in reality, at the moment, if you wanted to go and try this, you just go into your tenant, turn on Fabric, and then you can go and do a trial. And what we will do is then give you what we would call a Power BI premium capacity, which is a P1 capacity for free. And it was until the 1st of August. It's now been extended till the 1st of October. So, you're getting a full P1 capacity, which equates to what we call in Fabric world an F64. You get that capacity to go and then spin up and try what you want to go and do off the back of it. And it gives you a fully featured sort of trial capacity to then go and try all the, the data factory, the data engineering, data science, Blade, real-time analytics. Power BI is a little bit different because Power BI is GA, so it's being built on top of that. The others are in preview. So if you've got a premium capacity at the moment, you can enable Fabric in that as well. You won't be charged for the Fabric items. You'll just be charged as normal for your Power BI. So if that's a pro license, or if you're using a premium capacity.
Okay, got that. So yeah, sorry. Okay, and the other question that I had was around imagining that you're a largish enterprise and you've got lots of different teams that want to use this service. Do you provision just one, or do you even provision it at all? Do you just turn it on and then you go into it? How does the delegation and grouping work? Is it an RBAC model in there? How do you specify who can do what and who controls it?
Yeah, so there's a couple of bits inside that. So inside the Power BI tenant, like some of our other features, you have got the ability to just turn it on for the whole organization. So that's one way of doing it. Or you can delegate it to security groups, so AAD groups you can go and do, or what's our new Entra, a new way of saying it, AAD inside Microsoft. But so you can specify groups. So there are a number of trials. So I'm trying to be, I can't remember if this has been announced publicly, but you can spin up more than one trial inside your tenant. There is a limit at the moment, but again, you know, as everything, if you go and speak to engineering nicely via your customer account team, they will increase that one. You can also go and find out who's started a trial and obviously then tell them either, well, you're not allowed to do this and things around that. So there's very much the monitoring which has been built on top of Power BI. So the team have been very conscious about, well, you can go and lock this down if you need to, but you know, as it's a trial, we would love you to go and try it. There's also in Azure at the moment, you can go and buy the capacities. So if you wanted to go and spin up some capacities, they are a pay-as-you-go model at the moment. So they start on an F2 and then go up all the way up to 1,000 and something. So they double every time. You can obviously go and take those at the moment, and they're a stop-start. So you can obviously start an F2, and then if you didn't want to, the reserved instance model, which is very much like the Power BI Premium, is coming towards the end of the year around GA. So, you know, just to sort of to explain some of the licensing there.
Yes, so just so I can understand the overall use case for using Fabric, I have some data that I want to ingest in, crunch that data somehow, right?
Yeah.
Do some compute on it, and then do some visualization on that data, right? So that kind of the overall spectrum of things I should be thinking about in terms of using Fabric.
Yeah, it's very much a unified platform. So from that point of view, you've got all the tools from the data factory to help ingest it, to then either put it in a lakehouse, which is very much the in way of doing everything now, which is, you know, under the hood is, you know, the Azure Data Lake storage from that point of view in the OneLake, or you can spin up a data warehouse, which has got a SQL-like engine, you know, or interface to it. But underlying this, when we're storing the data, so as previously you would have stored this in a data warehouse, which may have been a proprietary engine, we're storing everything in the OneLake in Delta Parquet. So this is one of the big changes that you'll see, that when previously you would have put inside SQL and then that will be proprietary, although you would have been able to access it. It does mean that SQL's the place that you have to go via. This now is all being stored in the OneLake in Delta Parquet. So that means that all the engines have been tuned so they can go and use Delta Parquet, but also anything outside of Microsoft then which can attach to almost the Azure Data Lake storage, can go and can attach to that as well and read Delta Parquet if it's able to. So it's very much an open source sort of model now with how the data is being stored. So that means as well that you can use notebooks to go and explore the data via the data lake, or you can use the data warehouse as well to go and do a SQL-like. So it's very much, you know, letting people and the engineering teams or the data citizens use the tools they want to, whether that's Power BI, can read directly from the data lake. So there's a bit of a change around that for Power BI users. And just being able to do this. And, you know, there's another tool, you know, one thing that I haven't talked about, there's something called Data Activator. Internally, it was called Reflex, if you've heard of that. But Data Activator is an alerting tool. So it very much looks at patterns in your data. So if the data changes and things like that, and Power BI previously wasn't able to do this very well, and Data Activator brings that in to sort of alert you if the changes, for example, stock levels or, you know, a very tumbling window scenario, it learns from patterns and then you can get alerted. And, you know, almost I'd call it a bit like Power Automate for the enterprise. It's taking that you know, alerting to the next level, so it goes and does things off the back of what's going on.
And then does it come with a more enhanced UI, this whole Fabric? Like, you know, as Russell was saying, could be different personas using this. especially the ingestion part, as you know, the mapping for the Parquet format and whatnot can get pretty intense at sometimes. Is that, is there like a helpful UI now that helps like a more average user do all of that?
Yeah, definitely. So if you're used to the Power BI one, so it sits inside the Power BI UI, but when you enable that inside your tenants, what you'll see is this new persona switcher down in the bottom left, and that gives you different options on which tools you would use. So you get a data engineering persona, and then you would be allowed to go and do things around the lakehouse or data factory. You could switch into the Power BI, and then for the Power BI users that would be exactly the same, but you would then be able to go and connect to data sets which then would sit on top of the lake, etc. like that. So there's very much this personas now, and I think there's 5 in total. So there's there's the data engineering, the data scientist, I'm trying to remember, the real-time person, and then the data citizen at the front, and then data stewards at the bottom. So very much, if you're aware of Purview, which is obviously the governance tool within Microsoft, it's sort of using that as well. So there's very much this overview that Purview will sit around and help the data stewards understand what's inside Fabric. And Fabric could be seen as this OneLake is the moniker of the is it the it's the what's it, the one, I can't remember the term now, the OneDrive for data. So if it's this one place that you put all your data in, and very much look at that and understand that your data is in there, but you can, by capacity, make sure that people in different departments, so sales and sort of HR are able to share data with each other, but without copying it across. So there's domains that you can specify, but also capacities all the way down to the OneLake. So it separates the data, but previously you were copying things between different systems. So your SQL Server from your front end would have one copy, your data warehouse would have another copy. It's very much about putting it all in one place. And then there's this other concept of shortcutting, which is the quite cool sort of thing that has come in. You can actually reference data from other sources. So rather than actually copy that data into your OneLake, you can create a shortcut. At the moment in the preview, we've got ones to Amazon S3 buckets. So that means that rather than actually copy the data out of the S3 bucket, it's almost like a pointer to that data. So the OneLake can see it. It will do some clever caching over it and then read ahead and things like that. But when Power BI, for example, is trying to get hold of that data, it means that the data stays in your S3 bucket and it's not copied all over the place. And obviously, if you've got existing data lakes, you can shortcut those already as well.
Wow. Okay. Cool. Yeah, that's given me a lot to think about. I was going to ask about the Purview integration, which is quite key. I was kind of wondering about if you've got this as your one place to put all your data. Previously, I would have thought of a data lake as somewhere where you just want your analytics data and the stuff that you're finished and done with, not your transactional online stuff. Yeah. Could you use this for online transactional stuff as well, or is it not really applicable for? You probably can technically, but it wouldn't probably be the best. You
probably wouldn't do, for your online side of things as well. You would bring that potentially in. Obviously, a lot of online databases don't use the Azure Data Lake storage, which is what is under OneLake, sort of doing that. So you probably wouldn't do that. There are, I have seen a video post with a guy in a cube. So if anyone's looking for things, the guy in a cube did a recent video with Bob Ward, and he was talking about SQL Server with Fabric as well. And I think longer term there may be this push that SQL Server, maybe there'll be a closer integration between Fabric and SQL Server and things like that, and some of those online sources. So that will be interesting. But yeah, at the moment there's very much you've seen the Synapse world where you've seen the Dataverse. So there's already the links that are being built around that, so that people can already existingly leverage their Dataverse data inside Fabric and things like that as well. So it's trying to make this whole thing easier, and obviously putting everything inside the OneLake that's for the organization, that then people aren't then having multiple places where things are stored.
I'm then wondering about when you've got a big organization all using it, and they're all got different times when they're going to be coming in, different requirements. somebody's going to try doing something that's really really gnarly in terms of the compute or the data it's going to use. How does it balance out all of that demand on, I guess you've got a SKU that you're paying for. Is all of the compute distributed across whichever region you go to? Is it?
Yeah, so you can have different capacities for different areas. So again, if you're used to the Power BI, what you were able to do is buy multiple capacities, and then different teams could then own those capacities, and then you work out what that. So at the moment, very much with the Power BI, as an example, the premium capacity is just dedicated to Power BI, so that's running for 24/7, and you do that. With Fabric, you could get the F64 SKU, which is almost equal to what the Power BI Premium is. In the day, you could run it as a Power BI, just reporting on top of it. But then in the evening, it could just do all your ETL as well. Now, you need to balance that out. And we're doing some, smoothing over the day to work out your capacity to sort of say, look, if you've got some spikes in the day, we'll allow you to do that. But over a 24-hour period, you need to be within that capacity limits and things like that. So, it's very much for the users of that capacity, or the admins of that capacity, to work out, well, what workloads have I got? Could I, rather than have this server that's running just Power BI and then doing nothing in the evening because I'm just based in the UK, for example, could I be doing some ETL work off the back of it as well? So it's very much allowing the end users to work out, well, where is the compute really needed? But also, we're allowing you to burst above in certain points within reason, but then over the 24 hours, we'll make sure that, look, you can't get an F2 capacity, but then burst out and pretend to be an F64 capacity, because that's what you need to be paying for. So, it's definitely, the compute capacity is the fixed cost on a monthly basis. The storage is going to be slightly different. So there will be a variable cost on storage. We're still waiting for exact details on how that's going to be, but pretty much if you've got like a P1 premium capacity at the moment, you get 100 terabytes included. We believe that they're still working that out, but there'll be some storage included, but then there will be some points where you will have a monthly cost depending on your storage. But I know it's easier for me to say storage is quite cheap. So if you separate the storage out from the compute is the big fixed cost. And if you compare that to some of our competitors, that's where customers see that the compute is variable, and that can hurt them if they do big.
I was going to say only 100 terabytes. That's too. No, I wonder from an app developer perspective, right? Because that's my forte, my area. How should we think about Fabric, right? Like I think you briefly mentioned there's some SQL APIs you could use to get to that. Besides that, there are other kind of extensibility points where we can build applications that leverage Fabric specifically, or is it just a matter of using the existing underlying resources that you said are wrapped into Fabric?
Yeah, I suppose from an app point, it's probably understanding back similar with the operational databases. So, they'll be able to read with normal APIs. So, going forward, a bit like, when you see Power BI at the moment, you've got Power Apps, and they work very closely together, and being able to leverage that. And I'm sure it'll be similar with Fabric, that you'll be able to get endpoints that you'll be able to go and read out that data and things like that. The writing obviously will be the interesting point if they're coming back in. Obviously, that would usually be the operational side of the data, but there are things around that. And obviously we've got Cosmos DB, so very much the team that now look after Fabric sit under or are sitting together with all our other operational databases. So if you look inside Microsoft now, very much Arun, who owns the Fabric, also owns the SQL Server, the Cosmos DB, and things like that. So you're going to see a very tight coupling, I think, over, in the next couple of years about how those all work together, I think. And you see the Synapse link, which was for Cosmos DB and things like that. That'll be extended, I'm sure, to Fabric. So, there's going to be this very much, I think, us trying to work out with our app dev, colleagues about how does this all fit together and how do we talk to customers about this end-to-end experience. Obviously it's in preview at the moment, so if people have already seen, there's very much the co-pilots, and happy to talk about those. I know, Russell, you've got a question now, so maybe we'll save it for after that one, but that's another interesting area that we could talk a bit. So everything in Microsoft is going co-pilot, and Fabric isn't any different.
Well, that was my question. So I was going to ask exactly that. I was going to say we haven't spoken about AI now for 25 minutes. So what are the plans around Copilot within this interface? Is there already one there in the preview UI?
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing. So so if you go out, there's 2 Sizzle videos available from Build. One is a Fabric Copilot, and then there's also a Power BI one. They're both looking at visions of what Copilots will be. They're both in private preview at the moment. So if we talk about a roadmap at the moment, so Power BI is part of Fabric, that's GA. The data factory, the signups data engineering, the data warehouse, the data science, and the real-time analytics are all in public preview. The data activator is in private preview, but coming soon. And then we've got the 2 Fabric Copilots and the Power BI. They're very much still in very small sort of things. I believe we've got 10 or so customers sort of making sure we understand what they are. The videos make it look really exciting. So I need to temper a little bit from what I've seen and what I've heard, and try not to give away too much without getting told off that I'm not allowed to say too much around this. But there are 2 ones. One which is very much Power BI, and if you see the video, it goes and builds the report on top of an existing data set and does some really clever things in there to help you change the report, add some visuals in there. So for me, even though I'm a Power BI person, I go and build the data models, it really helped me because it takes me a week or 2 to build the nice visual front end reports, whereas this thing builds them in seconds, a 5 minute sort of thing. And then there's a wider Copilot for Fabric, which may help you build your data pipelines in Data Factory, for example, or help you just go and write some SQL and things like that. So very much like a programming, the GitHub Copilot will help you go and build those, or understand your data and things like that. So so there are Copilots coming. Whether they're Copilots like you've seen before or they're more feature Copilots is probably to be seen.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, I've seen a preview of the Copilot for Power Apps, and yeah, it's just incredible what it can do. But yeah, you've got to know how to use it a little bit as well, and you've got to be descriptive and use the right kind of language to give it enough information to be able to do a good job. Otherwise, you end up with something that you might not like.
Yeah, it's a bit like an internet search, isn't it? You're looking for questions, and I won't use the main term that, but if you're binging something or going along that, you've got to ask the right question. And I see the Copilot's exactly the same. It's giving it the right prompt to go and say, go and do something for me, and finding the right answer. And I think it's, as it says, the Copilot, it's not there to do your job for you, it's to help you do your job. Yeah. And you still got to review the output of it to make sure you're happy with what it's doing.
And then just kind of ask this in the interest of transparency. You said that this free trial is going to be around until October, and so beyond that, they're going to be they'll be seeing like some sort of a bill, right, for those if they continue using Fabric beyond that date. And I imagine those aren't going to be small numbers, right? I mean, Fabric is not like a cheap service.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. So it's been extended to October. It will be free from what I understanding until GA or some sort of things. So for example, at the moment, if you turn this on in your Power BI premium capacity, only the premium Power BI things are chargeable. So from that point of view, are actually drawing down against your capacities, performance and things like that. Whereas the Fabric ones are still not doing that. So there may be some changes and slowly rolled out, but I don't think this is, GA isn't 6 months away. I think I'm okay to say that sort of thing. But what GA is is obviously going to be sort of coming out in the next one, obviously your roadmaps and things like that. So very much, if you're the Power BI world, you will see monthly releases for Fabric, and it's very much going down that route. So the team that built Power BI is very much behind this, and the methodology and how they deliver and the consistency for users every month, that they will have this roadmap and we will deliver to that roadmap, and you will see those things like that, very much different to, when I started out with SQL Server 2006, or earlier, or things like that, or SQL Server. It's that you're not going to see 4 years before something's done. You will see every month a release train, and it'll be consistent across those products. So I think that's a good thing. But obviously, I know, as everyone knows, it's quite a challenge then to keep up with the changes that keep coming.
Well, that's what we're here for, right? To keep the public up to date on those changes. Yeah, we're happy to do that. No, this is really great, Ian. I actually understand what Azure Fabric is now for the first time.
Yeah, and I think this is this thing that, I've come very much from a Power BI world. I've now had my eyes opened a little bit more into the data engineering, and you'll very much look at the medallion architecture. They'll talk about how they build the data out on the data lake. So these bronze, silver, and gold sort of layers about bring it in. Back in the day of ETL, it was the raw, transformed, and then your presentation things in your ETLs or your SSIS or DTS back in when I first started in SQL Server world. So there is a lot of language similar as you go along and build this out. It's just using different processes, or lots larger scale with data. So I think customers, it's a big world to go and take on. For me, it's been quite useful starting from the Power BI because the interface is very similar. So it's now stretching me out, learning more about data lakes and things like that as well, and how you go and provision them.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I was thinking before having spoken to you, I was thinking about Fabric as being something that I go into Azure and provision to get access to, but it's not. It's Power BI. It's totally SaaS. It makes total sense now. And I'm starting to look at the preview thing in the background here. But it's an interesting approach, and I can see where it fits in the ecosystem now. So thank you very much. That's been really interesting. I really enjoyed that. It's good to learn new stuff every day.
Indeed, thank you.
Any final thoughts from yourself or Sujit? Any final questions from you?
Yeah, I think Ian's already kind of given us some hints that there's a lot of updates to come in this service. So we're certainly looking forward to all of those updates. And I would be happy to have any tips for how someone can get someone who maybe has never used Fabric before. What should they do, right? Is it just walk up to the portal, spin it up, I don't know, import some census data set or whatever and play around with that? Like, what's the kind of easiest way for someone to get going here?
Yeah, definitely. And I should have mentioned this before. So that's a really good point. Good question. So I had one customer that I was dealing with, and they pretty much went in almost blind to what Fabric was, and they didn't have a great experience. So we've talked to this 4 happy paths, and they're available on that, and I'll make the links available. But there's like 4 things about learning about Lakehouse, the data warehouse, data science, and also the real-time analytics. So I suggest to all my customers that they should go and do those first. There's also an MS Learn course as well to get you, the basics started there as well. So both of them are really good starting points for customers to go in. And then once you've done the happy path, it's a bit easier to step off those. And then, as again said, it's in preview. We want customers to use this and give us lots of feedback. But every month things are rolling out. There's blogs that are talking about there. There's known issues, so we're just we're being quite open around that. The GynaCube one video as well. They've got some great early sort of 10-minute videos talking about what Fabric is, how to get started, the costs and the licensing models and things like that. So those are definitely the things that I would start with. And a couple of our partners difficult to know whether I should mention names, but there's some definitely, you know, some of our partners are doing some very good videos about talking through, you know, use cases. You know, Engine, I know they were on the internal they're a very good partner. They've got some videos on YouTube as well that are talking through that. Advancing Analytics, again, they've also done some videos. There are others out there as well, so that you know, really good to sign up, and we'll give you a good intro to, you know, what you should be, you know, to get into Fabric and how to get started.
Other partners are available. We just have to
Yes.
put the disclaimer there. No,
Yes.
Thank you very much for getting in, and I'll try and get those links off of you and post those in the show notes as well to get people started quickly. So appreciate the time coming on, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.